Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kirsten and this is Small Bobbins. So in today's video we are doing some actual sewing. We are working on putting together all of the seams for all 10 bralettes. It's both pretty straightforward. I mean, you know, sewing a seam, it's pretty simple. It also gets very complicated with some patterns. Some of them I can just zip through really quickly, some of them I really struggled with. Essentially, I'm just trying to show the whole sewing process, and you know, with sewing any sort of piece of lingerie, piece of clothing, you are going to probably run into some issues or, you know, make a mistake here and there. Times it by 10 and you're going to make a lot, and so I did kind of give a little peek into the struggles that I had with some of these patterns. So mainly what I'm focusing on for today's video are things like sewing enclosed seams, which I'm super repetitive about, but hopefully the method that I'm using kind of sinks in after I explain it a couple times. Also sewing darts. If there is any sort of shaping with these bralettes, it's probably coming from making a dart or from kind of using a curved seam that you have to ease between two pieces. I do talk a bit about things like the stitch type and like the stitch length that you should be using. Also, there are places where you'll be using a straight stitch and some where it's better to use a zigzag stitch, so I do kind of go through the differences for those. I mean, we are really getting close to the end here. Like, when you're done sewing all of the seams, it looks like a finished bralette. Almost. And in some cases, I'm able to try on the pieces and really get an idea for the fit already. And there is even one bralette that's totally done after this video. So let's get started. So I'm starting with the Barrett bralette by Madeline Intimates, and the first step that we need to do is take the center front cup pieces and sew them together on this little piece here, because that's what's going to help form that little like triangle shaped cutout. The only thing to keep in mind is, since we are going to be applying picot elastic to these edges, we don't want to sew the whole way down, so you want to make sure that you stop 1/4 of an inch from either end. And we're sewing that with the self and the lining. We're kind of just treating these pieces as one piece of fabric. She does suggest in the instructions to use a temporary spray adhesive, but I found that it didn't really stick too well with the stretch tool, so I'm just going to skip it and be careful. And that is just going to be done using a straight stitch. Since it's not a part that's going to be stretching around our bodies, it's okay to use a straight stitch. Now, you can't really see it, but I put 2 little pins in there as she instructed, just so that I know where to start and stop. I'm just going pretty slowly so that I don't actually run over the pins. And I'm using my hand wheel to back tack. I mean, it's such a tiny little area, you don't really have to buzz through it so quickly. You can just go carefully. Just a little stitch. So that's the center front. So next I'm going to attach the center front cups to the side cups. And so we're going to be matching curves. I mean, that's always a bit tricky. You might have to ease it in some parts. But the real thing that I want to show you is how to create enclosed seams. And so that will mean that we have kind of a nice finish on the inside. It will look nice on the inside, and then you don't have kind of scratchy raw seams rubbing up against your skin. And to do that, so again, we're treating the center front part as just one piece. And I've got my self and my lining. The lining is black, the self is lilac. And I'm going to put the self part down, so we've got right sides together on here, and then I'll flip over my lining and put that on there as well. I'm kind of lucky with this stretch tool. It doesn't really have a right and a wrong side, so as long as all my pieces are facing the right way, I don't really have much to worry about. And I'm going to pin this in place and then stitch it with the specified seam allowance with a straight stitch, and then when I roll it out, that seam is just going to be encased nicely within the fabric. And this method of creating enclosed seams, I'm going to use it for pretty much every single bra. I think only maybe one or two don't have a lining, and so I won't need to worry about that. But this is just a great way that if you have a lining fabric, to really just hide all of the seams beneath the fabric. Essentially, all you're doing is just sandwiching one piece between the self and lining of another piece. If you think of it that way, like the side front cups here, they're essentially right sides facing together. You've just smushed the center front piece in there as well. As long as you get all your seams lined up and everything kind of facing the right way, it's not that difficult of a concept. For something like this that has curves, but it doesn't have any, this one in particular does not have any notches to really guide the two pieces together, I'm starting with the ends first because I know those are gonna line up pretty easily, and then I can just kind of go down the curve and match those together. It's not going to be perfectly smooth, like there are going to be little, you're not going to have puckers, you don't want puckered fabric, but it's not going to be completely flat. You are kind of like working it in there and easing it in there. And I guess that is the nice thing about using this kind of slippery fabric, is it is kind of easy to just maneuver it around. And this was definitely something that I had a hard time with when I first started sewing lingerie a whole 2 years ago. Just kind of getting the feel for easing the pieces together so that you don't end up with puckers. Easing two curves together, this isn't, you know, just limited to lingerie sewing. It is something that, you know, if you're making a princess seamed dress, or, you know, even sewing sleeves together, you're easing curves in with that as well. And so now I can unfold it. Obviously this isn't going to lay flat on a table because it's shaped to accommodate a, you know, round, curvy part of your body. But you can see now that seam is enclosed inside both layers. And what you can even do now, if you want to kind of flatten that seam a bit more, you can go over it and top stitch it. I think I will do that. Alright, and there we go. There's one part of the cup, and I'm just going to repeat that with the other side, and then also with the band piece. Okay, so now I've finished sewing on the other cup and the band, and that's what I have. Alright, so this is the Sierra bralette by Madeline, and so you see this is one side of the front, and I've got the lace and the stretch tool for the lining, and then this is the back band, which also has the lace and the lining. And so I'm going to sew these together with enclosed seams. So as I mentioned with that, we're going to, so the front piece, we're going to treat it as just one piece. It's going to be hard to tell again with this lace, it's pretty dark, I can't really show you the right and wrong side that well, but I'm putting the right side of the self fabric on top, and then also putting, so that means the right side is facing down, the right side is going to face up, and that's going to go on the bottom here. And so I'm going to sew that with a straight stitch with the specified seam allowance, and then repeat for the other side. Okay, so I've got the enclosed seams, and so that's it for constructing the actual, you know, cups and band of this. Next it just needs elastic and a hook and eye and straps, and it's all done. So next I'm going to be sewing up the Hyacinth bralette from Olulu, and this is a really easy one. It doesn't have a lining or anything, it's just two pieces, so we're not even going to do anything like enclosed seams. I'm just going to use my overlocker to sew up the side seams. The only thing you might want to take into account is that if you remember from my underwear construction videos, I talked about kind of the choices you can make between sewing up both side seams and then attaching the elastic in the round, or what you can do is sew up one side seam, attach the elastic kind of in one long pass, and then sew up the other side seam. For me, I kind of prefer to sew it on in the round. I think it gives a bit of a nicer finish on the side seams. So I'm going to finish up the side seams first, and then as far as the seams go, then it's going to be all done, and all I have to do is apply the elastics in the next video. If you want, you can pin this side seam together as you're sewing it. I'm just a bit worried about catching a pin on my overlocker blade, so I'm just going to skip it. Plus the knit kind of holds itself together pretty well anyway. And that's it. Both the side seams are done. So now I'm going to work on the Lovesick bralette by George and Ginger. And so this one has a couple darts to sew on the cut pieces, and I've already gone and pinned them together, and all I did to mark these out was I took the pattern piece and I cut out the darts. This is what they suggest in the pattern instructions too. And then I used that as a guide to mark the darts with just a chalk wheel. And then you just pin it together and sew it like you would any other dart. Alright, so I've sewn up one dart. This is the right side of the fabric. It's kind of hard to see with the black fabric. You can see I've sewn them up on the other side, and now I'm going to do the other cup. So the Lovesick bralette actually doesn't have any hardware, any elastic, any closures. It's all knit. There are some instructions if you do want to add elastic, but it would just be kind of elastic encased in your knit pieces. So it's very easy to sew, and I'm just going to switch to my overlocker to do the rest. I've just put my black thread in there, and no, first I need to sew the two cut pieces together, then attach the back band, so kind of, create the side seams, sew those up, and then you make straps with knit pieces, and then there's a bottom band that goes around the whole thing as well, and then you're done. So I'm just going to do that real quick. So where I'm at with the Lovesick bralette now, I have the darts sewn on the cups, I have the center of the cups sewn together, and I have the back band sewed, so I have kind of a shell of a bralette at the moment. I've also done the same with the lining piece, and I've also sewn up the straps. And so for attaching the straps, so this is the right side of the fabric, and I'm going to place a strap there, just pin it in place. I'll do the same with the other side, and then I'm going to flip the lining inside out and scoot that over top. And so that strap is getting sandwiched in there. And so right where I had that pin, I'm just going to kind of swap that out and go over the top of all three of those layers there. And let me check the instructions to see where exactly the back of the straps connect to. And then I'll do the same. So the straps are actually going to be kind of swooping down the bottom. They're going to be sandwiched in the back as well. And then you're just going to sew the lining and the outer fabric together around the top. And when you flip it out, that seam, that top seam, will be nicely enclosed, and the straps will be in kind of their normal position. And they'll also be kind of enclosed between the outer and the lining fabric. And it also says in the instructions that you can top stitch it, which I think I will do just so that it kind of lays nice and flat. Okay, so with the Lovesick bralette, I've got most of it constructed already, and I just finished top stitching around the top edge, so that really secures the outer fabric to the lining really well. The straps are in, and I've sewn together the short edges of the bottom band and turned that so, you know, right side is facing out, folded that, and now all I have to do is sew that to the bottom of the bra. So I'm just going to kind of swoop it over the top, line up the side seams. And this is really, if you've ever made like a t-shirt, which has like, you know, bands and you have to finish the neckline, you might use a facing or something like that. This is going to feel very familiar, and even with the steps, a lot of the steps do involve pressing so that you do get a nice seam, and pressing is not really typical with lingerie sewing because usually you're using materials that would melt if you press them. So this is definitely the odd one out of all of the patterns that I'm making and reviewing. Actually, I think I want this side seam in the center back. So once I line this up, I'm gonna use my overlocker and just overlock all the way around. And it also says that you can top stitch around that edge, and I'll probably try it on to see if I want to top stitch it or not, and then it will be done. There we go. The band is attached, and our first bralette is done. So next time you'll see this one will be in the video where I'm modeling all of them because we don't have any elastics or closures or anything else to attach to this. Okay, so now I'll get started on the Noelle bralette from Madeline Intimates, and with this one, what I'm gonna do first is attach two pieces of lace to kind of create the bigger piece. I didn't have any lace that was wide enough to fit the entire pattern piece, which isn't really a surprise because it's a very big pattern piece. It's a high neck crop top bralette style with a racer back, and so for the front piece, for instance, it didn't quite reach up to where the straps go, so I have just kind of two little like triangle shaped pieces, and then for the back I have a piece that kind of makes the racer back. So you might be able to see the pins right there. And all I'm going to do is just kind of do a narrow zigzag, so probably 2 for the width and 2 for the length, and just sew kind of along the edge. And actually the way I have it pinned right here, I'm going to put the scalloped edge on top. This other, right now I have the flat edge from the other piece on top, and so I'm going to switch that around and just kind of follow along the edge, and it should blend in pretty nicely. I'm just using white thread because it will blend in anyway with this light blue, and then I'm just going to treat it as one piece of lace. There you go. I mean, it's really light. You can't really see it. And then once the lining goes on, I don't think you'll be able to really notice the join at all. And then I'm just going to do the same with the front piece and then move on to the next step. Next, for the Noelle, I'm going to sew the darts. So what I'm doing right now is just, it's such a fine, delicate lace that I'm using. Also, it's kind of tough to pin the dart. So right now I'm just kind of marking the dart legs with pins. It's not like I have a marking tool that will show up on the lace. The pins should work decently well. Just marking those out with great care and difficulty. And then I'll sew them up. I've already pinned on the lining, which is also very slippery, but actually much easier. So I'll pin these, and then we'll sew them. And then once the darts are sewn, we're going to put the wrong sides together and just treat the lining and the front as one piece. And so that way we can attach the back of the bra with enclosed seams. Okay, so the darts are sewn up. Now I'm going to attach the back of the bra to the front by enclosing the side seams. The front pieces are wrong sides together, so, you know, this is how it's going to look on the front of the bra when it's done. You can see that it's easy to tell because the darts are inside and they're touching each other. So we're sandwiching the front pieces in between the back pieces. So I'm going to pin that up, and I'm just going to overlock it. I have to put some white thread in there. I'll overlock it, and then I'm going to do it on the other side, and then I will attach the bottom band, and that will be it for constructing all of the seams. Then all that's left is the elastics. Next I'll construct the band, the bottom band for the Noelle. So to construct this, I'm going to do it similarly to how I sewed up the top part of the bralette, and I am just going to put those together, sew that up with my overlocker, and then continue. So now I just need to attach the bottom band to the top part of the bralette, and so you notice that this isn't a perfect rectangle. It doesn't have straight side seams. They do angle in a bit, and the smaller part down there is the bottom, and this wider part is the top. So this is where you're going to attach it to the top part of the bra, just like you would any other sort of cuff or band. I'm just going to slip it over the top of it, right sides together, and use my overlocker to sew that up. I would say definitely the trickiest part with this next step is just making sure that the lining and the lace all stays together. So I'm just going to carefully pin everything together. I'm going to match up the side seams, and I'm going to kind of use that as my guide to pin around and make sure everything stays in place when I attach it. Excellent. So now all this needs is the elastic and hardware, and it's done. Okay, so next I'm working on the Rosie bralette by JMB Pattern Designs. So the instructions for this are actually found on her website, and I think she also has a YouTube tutorial for it as well. It's a pretty simple design, just a triangle bralette. I've gone ahead and I've made kind of lace overlays that are slightly smaller than the cut pieces themselves. She does say you can use an optional lining if you'd like, which would require cutting out extra pieces of each of the cut pieces. So I'm not using a lining, I'm just using the ivory stretch tool and then putting a lace overlay on top of that, which means I won't be enclosing the seams. And so I'm going to first go over the scalloped edge with black thread, which is kind of a narrow zigzag, just to kind of base that piece down. And then I'm just going to treat each piece as one piece of fabric. Got some black thread in here. Being careful with my pins. And I'm just going to gently kind of trace around the lace. Along the bottom edge and along the curve that's going to get attached to the other cup, I'm just using a longer stitch length because it's really only needed to baste the lace onto the tool. So I'm not so worried about it needing to be very fine or very precise. I just kind of want to get the two pieces to stick together so that it doesn't shift around when I go on to the next steps. Right, and I'll just repeat that on the other pieces as well. So next I'm just going to put right side together for each of the two pieces. The only difficult thing with these is you just have to be sure to kind of ease the curve together, but then after that you can either overlock it, or I'm just going to use kind of a normal stitch on my regular machine, sew that up, and the cups are done. I do also want to mention that I don't typically backstitch for most of the seams when I'm making lingerie. mainly because I'm using such delicate fabrics. Like my machine, and it might be different for yours, my machine would just kind of chew up the tool, especially if you're starting right at the edge. So because these seams are going to be finished and covered with, elastic or otherwise, I'm not too worried about everything unraveling. It's going to kind of get captured by the elastic anyway, so I just skip back stitching. Alright, so next I'm working on the wrap bralette by Mood. So this is very similar in style to the Sierra bralette by Madeline, and I took a look at the instructions for the Mood bralette, which are available on their website, and I didn't really like them. It recommends using French seams. It kind of comes at the construction from a garment sewing perspective rather than like a lingerie sewing perspective, and there are some differences in techniques, so I'm going to mostly ignore them and just construct it kind of the same way that I did with the Sierra. First, I had to kind of cut an extra piece for that front wrap piece because my lace wasn't wide enough. So first I'll use a zigzag and attach this lace, kind of creating the bigger piece. Then I will sew the darts on the lace and the lining. And then I'm just going to use regular enclosed seams to attach the back band. For connecting the pieces of lace, all I'm going to do is just use a zigzag. I don't want it to be too narrow or too tight because I find that with my machine it kind of wants to bunch the fabric up. So I'll keep it fairly, let's say like 2.5 by 2. And it might be a bit hard to see on the camera, there's like this scalloped edge and then kind of a mesh border and then the flower print, and I'm going to try to mostly follow the flower print, and I might even end up trimming away kind of the rest of it so that it blends in a bit better with each other, but we'll see how it looks. And when you're doing this, you just kind of want to take your time. There's a lot of like little like bumps and corners and waves that you're trying to go around. In the past when I would first start doing this, I would try to just maneuver it while I'm sewing, and I found that I would get a lot of, unattractive bunching together. So now I just take it easy, I'll lift up my presser foot, and I'll really turn the fabric around on the needle to try to get better results. Okay, so I like the way that turned out. I am going to do the other one and then decide if I really want to trim it back. I do want to keep in mind this will have a dart sewn onto it, and it does have kind of a lot of fabric in there right now, so I will definitely want to trim away the stuff that's in the back. And of course this is all just going to depend on what kind of lace and fabric you're using, so you might not have to do this step. Now I did go back and trim away the excess lace, and I just followed along that kind of flowery edge at the bottom there, and actually I really like how it turned out. It looks a lot more seamless. I mean, there is a bit of an edge there, but overall I'm really pleased with how that looks. And so now, it gives me a lot more freedom with this pattern. I can use different laces even if they're not wide enough. So I'm currently fighting with pinning out my dart here, and I'm looking at it, and it is actually a very strange shape. I mean, one leg is up here, the other one is down here, and even when I fold it out on the paper pattern, like, you can see, so here's the fold, it doesn't true up at all. Like, you get this weird little dip. I guess if you press it that way, then you get like, it's gonna like show through in a weird way though. So this is where I'm at right now. I'm trying to figure out what exactly I want to do. A bit annoyed. I mean, I guess that does look like more of like a strap shape in the top of the cup. Let me see. I mean, we're just kind of tucking it back, like, oh, okay. Alright, I have something pinned. The instructions really just say, like, sew a dart, follow the dotted lines on the pattern, and I'm gonna start at the, like, point, which I don't usually do, but that's where there's actually, you know, fabric folded onto itself, and I've got, like, a bunch of pins kind of, like, crisscrossed on each other, so I can kind of see my path. Oh, okay, I'm, like, having thoughts about this. I was really prepared for this to be an easy one. I was just like, okay, I already did the Sierra, like, this will just be the same thing with a dart. That's not the case. Okay, here we go. And then I just have to do this 3 more times for the other side of the lace and the 2 lining pieces. Alright. I mean, I don't know if you could see, like, at the end, I'm just stitching through the single layer of lace, but I guess it is a decent line for, yeah, I mean, I guess it forms a dart, okay. And I've got this little strappy shape up here, which is going to be a total joy to sew the elastic on, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm feeling a bit cynical about this one now. So I'm not going to film my struggle with the next 3 pieces, but I will check back soon. Okay, so after a mighty struggle, I have finally sewed the darts in all 4 layers. So you can see they look kind of weird, but if you have them situated kind of towards the strap, so away from the center, toward the side seam, then it kind of looks okay, because all of that bulk is going to be kind of hiding behind that strap piece. So this is the wrong side facing up. I've got that floppy weird dart facing up. You can tell I'm just, like, thrilled with this pattern. And I'm putting wrong side down of the lace on top and just kind of folding all of the, not really folding, I'm like trying to maneuver the darts so that they're laying as nicely as possible on top of each other, and my stitching on such floppy weird darts was not amazing, so they don't seem to line up perfectly, and I'm just gonna pin them together. From now on, I'm just going to treat them as one floppy, bulky layer. And remember, I mean, you can obviously test them. I know the stretch tool with my iron on its very lowest setting and with a press cloth, I can press any wrinkles out. I have not tested it with this lace. You really want to be careful using an iron with any of your bra making materials. You know, elastics are not going to be nice natural fibers. They're made out of, like, chemicals, synthetics, plastics, all sorts of fun stuff, and they will probably melt. So use at your own risk if you would want to try to, like, press these darts into submission. I mean, I know the Noelle also makes use of darts, and, you know, it, like, darts are common for bras and bralettes. Like, having a darted cup is common, but yeah, these just seem really weird. There it is. Next step, I'm going to take the back pieces. So for the back band, it's in 2 pieces. They are mirrored. They need a seam on them. And then we've got the matching lining pieces. And for this, I will just do a simple enclosed seam. And I'm going to use a very small stitch length, a short stitch length. Mine's going to be at 2.5, just because I found with delicate fabrics, a shorter stitch length makes it less likely to bunch up together. Going to briefly check the instructions just to make sure I know what the seam allowance is. Okay, it doesn't say a seam allowance. That's handy, so I'm just going to, yes, yeah, okay. And so that means when I pull the lining and the lace over, oh, I love this pattern. So now the seams are nicely enclosed. And now I'm gonna do exactly the same thing for attaching these ends to the side seams of the front pieces. So my front pieces I'm going to treat as one piece, and it's gonna be a bit kind of, you're rolling a bunch of pieces kind of around with each other. So I've got the back pieces facing up on the bottom so that the lace can go right side together with the lace of the front piece. And then scrunch up the front piece, bring that lining piece all the way around, and it's going to be kind of hard to see. It looks like just one big lacy tulle mess, but that piece of the back is kind of cupping and like rolled all the way around the front piece. And then I'll do that, and then just repeat for the other side with the other piece, and then we'll be done with the seams. All we'll need is elastics. Okay, so I've finished attaching the back band to the front pieces for the mood wrap bralette. I have struggled mightily with this pattern, but you know, we got there in the end. I'm probably gonna wrap it around my body just to check on the fit because it seems real big right now. And if that's the case, then I'll have to unpick all of these teeny tiny little enclosed seams that I did and probably sew it with a bigger seam allowance, or yeah, even just like kind of squeeze out a bunch of fabric. Just when I look at it compared to the Sierra, it's really, really big. So we'll see. And then I will take this into the next video to finish it up with elastics and straps and closures and all of that. Okay, so next I'm going to be working on the Darcy bralette by Mood. And this one has quite a lot of pieces, so I'm just kind of going through my pile of lace, setting them all out. Everything's got kind of a corresponding lace and lining piece. And I'll first start with working on the top bodice and then the band. So there are two pieces to each cup, and you can see when you line them up together you get kind of like a dart at the top, and so that's what's going to kind of form the shape of the cups. Now the actual instructions for the bra on the Mood website talk about sewing them kind of like a princess seam on a garment and using French seams to enclose the raw edges, which is kind of similar to what they said with the wrap bralette, and I don't really want to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and sew it as kind of enclosed seams, not as French seams, because I think that will get pretty bulky. Let me get these facing the right way. So this is the side top bodice, and I need to attach it to the center top bodice. So this is the seam that's going to connect together, and I'm going to treat this side as just one piece. I will put my lace on top, so those are right sides together, and then put my lining on the bottom there. Obviously there are some curves that we have to ease together, so I'm going to do that with the pins and then sew it up with the necessary seam allowance. Okay, since this is going to be a vertical seam, I'm setting my stitch length to pretty short. It's only going to be about 2, and there's no zigzag because it doesn't need to stretch. So now when I fold these pieces out, I can see that I attached this on the wrong side. And evidently I cut this piece incorrectly. I can see that it's the wrong side I don't know what I want to do with it now. So after my little disaster, I unpicked the one cup, recut it with the lace going the right direction, and I just kind of went ahead and sewed it, and I was feeling a bit frustrated, so I also kind of skipped forward to the next step without bothering to set up my camera properly. But I realized that it would have made more sense if I had attached the two center pieces first with the enclosed seam method, and then I would have that one center piece to kind of act like the one piece with the lining and the lace, and then I could sandwich the side cup pieces on top of either side of the center cup pieces, and that would have made it a lot easier. Right now I'm doing kind of a squished up looking burrito method thing to pin everything in place so that I get the two center pieces attached with enclosed seams. I am really straying from the instructions with this whole construction method, so but it worked, so I'm really pleased with that. What I'm gonna do first is attach the upper back band. So I'll treat this whole piece as one, and I will sandwich my lace and lining for the upper back band and sew that with enclosed seams, and then I will attach the lower front and lower back band pieces together to form one big ring, and then I will attach the two pieces together. I did just check back at the instructions, which I'm mostly ignoring at this point, and they did it kind of the opposite way, where they attached the front and lower part of the bra together and then sewed the front and back together at the side seams. So what I'm doing is more the entire top part and the entire bottom part, and then I will sew them together at that center seam. I did this, again, this makes more sense to try to get the enclosed seams, which I am obsessed with, and I would rather do than their suggested French seams. Now I get to attach the top and bottom, and so that's simply placing right sides together. The only tricky part is there's kind of this curvy part, so I will do that, and also, I am going to skip ahead and already attach some strap elastic here, because they suggest attaching the strap elastic between the kind of top and bottom layers of the back band. You just kind of sandwich your strap elastic in there, and it does have on the pattern where the strap pieces need to go, which is nice. So you kind of tuck it in there, and the strap will actually run on top of the upper back band portion. And then, unfortunately, they just say to kind of fold the edges down of the top and bottom part of the bra. No elastic, which I wholeheartedly disagree with if you're trying to make a bralette. I guess if you really mean it more as like a crop top, you can skip the elastic, but yeah, I don't know. You really need elastic, I think. And so they just say, you know, stitch down the elastic at the top part of the back band when you're folding it down and hemming it. But I will save that for the next video, but for now I will tuck two pieces of elastic down there. And one other quick note, maybe you've realized I've talked so much about enclosed seams, but when you do this, you're not going to get enclosed seams. I'm trying to kind of wrap my head around if it is possible, but this is kind of similar to how the Noelle is constructed as well. So they're both kind of bralettes that have a second band on them, and what you could do is you can attach some plush backed elastic along that inside seam if you want to really not have any raw edges sticking out. If you really want to not have any raw edges against your skin. But for me, I think it's going to be fine. It just really, the looks of it, I like how enclosed seams look on the inside. So we'll see. Maybe I'll apply elastic, or maybe I'll just leave it. I could have also used my overlocker for this seam, but I find that it's a bit harder to follow curves on my overlocker, so I just decided to use my regular machine. And right now my straps are kind of a crazy length, and that's because I have enough length to also do the like kind of crisscrossy strappy details, but I haven't yet cut them down to kind of the lengths that they need to be, which the instructions don't actually specify. I think I just kind of guessed what they should be. And so I just cut them in half for now, and I will chop off the pieces that I need for the 4 extra straps, and then just use the remaining part to create the regular shoulder straps. Okay, yeah, I do see that center curved seam. It looks nice. This whole thing is very big though, so I will be curious about how it fits. Alright, time to get started on Raquel. This is one that has been kind of intimidating me a bit because it's pretty different from all the other ones. I'm going to start by serging together the lining and the kind of top self fabric, which in my case is exactly the same thing, both using the pink stretch tool. I'm going to serge this top edge together. Now this is the bottom front cup, and that's going to make a good guideline for the next step as well. And the next one. Okay, got those. So I have the lining on top of the lace for the top cup, and I'm just going to go over it, overlapping the bottom cup piece the width of the overlocker stitch. So place it down. So the raw edge of the lining is lined up on this side of the overlocker stitch, and I'm just going to kind of ease this curve onto this straight line, pin it in place, and then flip it over and stitch it that way with a kind of narrow zigzag, probably 2.5 and 2.5. I'm going to flip it over just because I have burgundy thread on top and pink on the bottom. If it seems like it will be too difficult to do that and keep it lined up, then I will just, suck it up and switch the thread in my machine. Okay, so if I decide to go ahead with the stitching like this, I have to not only be very careful of pins that are attached on the other side, but also making sure that I kind of stay in line with that overlocker stitch, otherwise it's not going to be attached correctly. Let's see how that goes. I'm going to take my time. Moment of truth. I mean, it looks okay to me. It's all attached. Yeah, I mean, I got the lining with every stitch, and there's definitely, a curved shape. Yeah, I think it's not bad. So then the next step is just attaching the back band, and I have 2 pieces of pink stretch tool to be the back band, so one is the lining, one is the self, and that's been covered for pretty much every other bralette, so I'm just going to go ahead and do it without filming. And then next we are going to use some elastic in this video to attach the bottom ruffle. So I waffled over whether to include this step in this video or in the next video, since it does involve applying elastic already. So with the Raquel, we are getting some support from elastic tension. So she does specifically say in the instructions that you need to measure the top and bottom edges of the bralette and cut your elastic at about 80% of that length. And that means that we're going to be stretching it out when we sew it on, so that when we're done sewing, it kind of snaps back into place and provides some support in that way. That does mean that it will have negative ease on the pattern, which will provide some support and a really close fit. So I measured the top edge and it was about 76 centimeters, and the bottom edge was about 70 centimeters. So that means for the top, I need a piece of elastic that is 61 centimeters, and for the bottom, 56 centimeters. So I've got my top piece, and what we need to do is divide this into quarters. I have the quarters marked off, so these two, obviously the ends need to get stretched out to the ends. These two pins are going to match up with the side seams, and then the center one in the center. And for the bottom part, we're going to do the same, so I need to mark off in quarters. We're going to stretch it in the same way. The ends will go to the ends, the kind of quarters one inward will go on the side seams, and then the center will line up with the center. And then I need to flip this over. I'll do the first pass with the picot elastic. You know, I've talked about this a lot, especially in my panty making series as well. I'll do that, and then when I flip it over, that's when I will attach the bottom ruffle. So I'm gonna pin everything into place. I think that will make it much easier to make sure everything is lining up properly. And I'll try to wrap my head about how this bottom ruffle gets attached. Okay, so I did indeed miss a step about sewing the bottom ruffle together. So you do put one seam in the back and that goes at the center back. I have decided that I'm going to sandwich that bottom ruffle. So I've kind of pinned it into place along the bottom edge of the bralette, and then I've put the picot elastic on top, kind of as indicated with the diagram. I didn't pin it all the way on. I personally don't really like to pin elastic on, especially when you need to stretch it, because I mean you can see it's just kind of a mess, and you know the pins are sharp. So I'm going to be very careful as I sew it on. I guess my main concern is it has to stretch a lot. It's like not evenly distributed, so it's gonna stretch a lot on the cup portion. It's not going to stretch as much on the back portion. So I'm gonna take a guess that this cup is going to end up having more volume than I need for it, because all of this scrunching is gonna lead to a very like cupped shape. Actually, what I'm gonna do, I'm going to ignore the instructions with the where to place the elastic. I'm going to ignore that kind of quartered section, and I'm just going to redistribute it more evenly, and we'll see how that works out for me. Alright, I'm going to set this to my desired zigzag length. And so, just a quick run through of the picot elastic. We've got the right side facing up for the bralette, the plush side facing up for the picot, and the picot edge is facing inward on the bra, because we're going to sew one pass as close but not overlapping the picot edge. We're going to trim away the excess and then flip it over and have that nice picot edge showing, and then we'll do the second pass. When you pull the elastic, what you want to get is that it kind of straightens out with the fabric underneath. You do not want to pull the fabric underneath, and this can be really tricky, especially the way I'm doing it here, where I have kind of a long distance. So that's why I'm kind of pulling it where I do have a reliable marker. So on that center back seam there, I'm pulling it there, and then I'm just kind of using my finger to grab a closer piece. And it is also difficult because you're pulling everything this way, but you're sewing it that way. So yeah, it's a bit tricky. It takes some practice. Alright, and you can see from the other side all of that nice rippling. That is what we want with this bra. I mean, obviously it's going to depend on the design of the piece and whether or not you want that kind of scrunched up effect, but in this case it is how the bra is designed to look, so that's what we're going for. And if you get nice even tension on it, then your gathers should kind of look nice and even across the whole bra. You can actually see maybe I have less tension around here, so it does kind of, you know, it's not all nice and scrunched up. It's a little less right here, and then it kind of picks up again. Now I'm going to do the bottom edge. This is just going to be a bit trickier because I also have the bottom ruffle just pinned on underneath. I think if I were smarter, I would probably do like a quick basting stitch down there, so then I didn't have to worry about pins getting in my way. But let's just see how it goes. Okay, so I just finished sewing on the bottom part. Nope, that's not even the bottom part. Okay, and when I flip the picot elastic the right way, so actually you don't end up seeing the picot elastic on the bottom part at all, and now I've got a nice little ruffle. I can see there's a spot where I missed one of the layers of tulle. Okay, so contemplating either taking out the stitches there and restitching it. Let me check if there are any other spots where that happened. I'm not going to beat myself up about it too much because this is kind of tricky and I'm kind of taking some shortcuts. Either I would rip the stitches out there and kind of realign everything so that I do catch that top layer, or what I could do is when I'm top stitching, going over it a second time, I can just kind of fold it under there. I'm gonna try that because I already had to redo the stitching twice, and I don't want to do it again. So next I'm going to clip all of the excess fabric off using my duck-billed scissors, and then I will do the second pass, and then that will be it for the Raquel in this video. And for the second pass, I want to be sure that I'm sewing as close to the other edge as possible. So not where I stitched, but really the edge of the picot elastic, obviously without going over the edge. And you can see I decided not to rip out the stitching and just kind of top stitch over it. Got a little bit of wonkiness here, but actually it's not too bad. Time for the top, and I'm gonna do exactly the same thing. All I'm gonna do is switch my top thread from burgundy and then back to pink and then back to burgundy, and then I'll be done with this. Alright, the very last bra is the Milla from Mood. So I've mentioned the Mood instructions before. They're not my favorite. For the cups and the band, so essentially you have a two-piece cup, but the outer piece is connected to the whole band. So you have kind of this one long piece, it wraps around in the front and then connects to the cup pieces. They instruct to connect the lace pieces together and the lining pieces separately and then kind of sandwich them together. Again, they don't really suggest using elastic to finish the edges, but I'm going to do that anyway. Usually I would do enclosed seams, but I'll follow the Mood instructions for these. Perhaps I will regret that, but We'll see. Okay, I already changed my mind and I'm doing enclosed cups just because this lace is especially delicate and I feel like sewing it with the lining all as one piece will make it much easier to sew and more stable. One thing that will change is they did instruct as you're sandwiching together the lining and the lace layers that you would put the strap elastic between those. Kind of like if you were making a tank top and adding spaghetti straps or something like that. So I won't be doing that method for attaching the straps. And I will repeat that for the other side. Whew, okay, so thank you so much for sticking through that entire video. So like I said, you know, we kind of are almost at the end, but also kind of not. So the next video is going to be fun and challenging, probably more challenging than fun. So we're really going to be finishing the bralettes, putting on the strap elastic, the picot elastic, attaching any closures like hook and eye or G-hooks or anything like that, and using the hardware as well, the rings and sliders when we're creating the adjustable straps. And that's really going to finish them all up. Don't forget, all of the materials came from my web shop, which is smallbobbins.com, and most of the bralettes that I made, I created their own little bralette kits from them, so you can really just get started with the whole batch of materials that you need to create a gorgeous soft bralette if you want. So yeah, feel free to head over there and check out the selection. I would be so happy if you did so. Definitely, if you want to continue following along, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. If you like this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up. And yeah, definitely leave me a comment if you have any questions or comments about this video. I love reading them. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye!